welcome with a round of applause our speakers Julien Ancele, Yann Gaston-Mathé, and also Kenneth Shinozuka. And Piers Cumberlege will be introducing them and moderating this panel. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. When I was here this morning, I had Eric Stolmer, and we were talking about communities in space. Earlier, just before this, we were talking about water. And I'm going to introduce to you first Julien Ancele, who has got a business operating a social impact business in Southeast Asia, working with water. He's going to tell you the story about that, the problem that it's facing, and the solutions that they're offering. Julien, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So the issue we're trying to address is the issue of access to safe drinking water. Today, still 10,000 people are dying every day just because they have diarrhea and they drink filthy water. So we're trying to address the needs of 2 billion people who don't have today a satisfactory solution. They have to go to the wells to take some water. Usually they are filthy, even take water from the ground or from ponds. So you have to fill that gap. And what we imagine as a solution is basically a social enterprise where we would create micro water treatment units in remote villages of Cambodia, and we would empower local entrepreneurs to manage it and provide safe drinking water to their communities with an economically viable solution. So we're impacting today 500,000 people, and basically the issue for us is how do we scale it up? And that's when the question of technology comes into play. We're obviously not a tech company per se, but we started thinking a few years ago with the support from Danone, Accenture, about how we could leverage that to create more value on the field. And we imagined some very simple, actually, use cases that actually were delivering a lot of impact. So we improved the logistics, because when you manage a network of 300 micro stations in the middle of Cambodia, you're dealing with a lot of data, a lot of complexity. So how can you improve logistics, improve the operations, or take all the data we get from the clients and try to propose some solutions that are suitable? There's also one aspect of digital that was very important to us, was the aspect of skills development of these local entrepreneurs. So when we talk about local entrepreneur, you have here one in Madagascar. She's actually a villager with low level of education. She was a farmer before, and we are trying to train her to become an entrepreneur, manage a business, manage a P&L. So we are using tablets and very simple applications to train them. Serious game, something most of you have heard. We are applying serious games on the field and sending some quiz that we can take, and we can understand what are the skills gaps between what we expect from them and what they actually deliver. Another very simple example is you can provide them with tele-maintenance services. So before that, I mean, whenever there was a problem with the solution, the technology, you had to call our technicians, and it would take days sometimes to get there in the middle of Cambodia. Now they just need to call us, and through tablets we can diagnose the problem with them and very simply get to a solution. So here we are, we have some very concrete examples of the technology and the use case being actually very, very, I would say, decisive for us to create impact. And we are not talking here about highly sophisticated technology. We're not even talking AI, we're not talking big data or anything like that. But the simple application on the ground of those technologies is actually a decisive factor for us, and it's what's going to help us to, I would say, scale up our solution.
So really, in the context of inclusive technology, you don't have to be doing fancy things. You can be doing very simple application of very simple, well-tried, well-tested technologies and making a huge difference in the livelihoods of people, in their wellness.
Absolutely. And to be perfectly honest, we didn't start like that. We started in our labs, in our research centers and data centers, and trying to imagine some great solutions for these people, and it didn't work, obviously. So we changed paradigm, and we spent more time on the field, actually designing solutions with them, with the workers, with the beneficiaries, and how things changed dramatically. So what's funny about that is that the simple change in the way you build the functionalities can actually make or break your solution. So definitely not something, I would say, crazy, but really something adapted to the ground and to the end users. So that's, I would say, the magic trick that you have to use to create some impact in this area.
Julien, that's fascinating, and it's great to see the impact that you're making there. I'm going to move on now from you to Kenneth Shinozuka, who is, I would say, someone who, I mean, Julien used the word crazy. I wouldn't say that Kenneth is crazy, but some of the stuff he's doing is kind of out there and kind of wacky. But you're a serial entrepreneur, and you started off with something which actually is very practical and operating now. And from that, you've now moved on to something which is much more out there, a long way ahead. But you said maybe in a year's time, there's something you're doing which will impact me in my old age. Kenneth, over to you.
Yes, so hi everybody, my name is Kenneth Shinozuka. I'm currently a fourth-year student at Harvard, and I've worked on two major projects in the past. The first, as Piers was mentioning, is a very practical and simple technology. It's a wearable sensor that sends alerts to caregivers' smartphones when their patients get up out of bed. This is useful for preventing falls among elderly patients, and it's also useful for detecting wandering, which is a huge problem among Alzheimer's patients. The sensor was inspired by my relationship with my own grandfather, who suffered from Alzheimer's for over 12 years, and towards the end of his life, wandered out of bed at night very frequently, which gave my aunt, his primary caregiver, a lot of stress.
Let me, before you move on from that, just ask you, I mean, how long did it take you to design that, and how long did it take you to get it out there? You say it's now available on the internet. I mean, how long did it take to get to that space?
Yeah, so the trajectory from the initial idea to the commercial product was about 4 years. So the initial idea came up with in the fall of 2012. One night when I was looking after my grandfather, I saw him getting up out of bed, and the idea for this sensor sort of flashed in my head. And then it took about 2 years of prototyping before we had something that we thought we might be able to release to the public. Then we did some more beta testing and refined the product some more. And then by early 2016, we started selling the sensor online. It was an incredible process. I mean, to go from the initial ideation, realizing the challenges that I had to surmount in order to create the sensor, to finally being able to create a product that would be able to give peace of mind to many families around the world.
So that development process really set you up for what you're doing now, which is?
Yes, so I'm currently a member of the team of the Qualia Research Institute, which is a research nonprofit based out in San Francisco that is trying to discover the science of consciousness. We are interested specifically in trying to understand the mathematical structure underlying positive subjective experiences with the ultimate goal of designing interventions that improve the quality of subjective experience for not only patients who suffer from mental and neurological disorders, but also for all people.
So, can you translate that into simple language? I mean, what's that going to mean for me?
Yeah, great question. So right now, we're still super early in this process. The issue really is that we don't really have a solid understanding of really like the precise mathematical structure underlying your subjective experience. We have some idea about the neurotransmitters that might be involved in happiness, but we're really not at a level of understanding where we're incredibly precise. So the goal is to get to that point, but in terms of a practical technology, what this might look like in terms of your day-to-day life, you might imagine something like transcranial magnetic stimulation. That's a technique that uses an electromagnetic coil placed over your head that sends magnetic pulses through your skull into your brain. And this is currently being used as a treatment for depression, but it's not really widespread. We don't have commercial products that are magnetic coils placed over your head for just making yourself happier on a day-to-day basis. But maybe in due time, once we understand how to precisely stimulate the brain in order to induce happier states of consciousness, we'll be able to get to a more widespread technology. Precision and getting right, cutting through all the data to come down and analyzing it to come down to a very clear, specific points of application. Fascinating. Yann, you're working in the same space in a way. It's a different space, but it's precision. It's developing new molecules or helping to accelerate the process of doing that. Tell us a bit about what you're up to, Yann.
Yes, thank you, Piers. Yes, in a way we are working to improve the process where once you have identified a biological mechanism which is related to a disease, and you have some idea on how to do some intervention, some biological intervention to address the symptom or the evolution of the disease. When you look at it from a pharmacological perspective, you need a drug, and you need to find a new molecule which will be able to interact with the biological mechanism, which is very often a protein in the organism, in order to block it or to activate it, to modulate it. And this, you hope, this can become a great drug on the market, because it will correct, the pathological mechanism and restore, improve basically, the health of the patients. The big issue with that is that not only do you need the right target and a molecule which interacts potently with that target, you also need a molecule which is selective, because if you have a molecule which is interacting with many proteins in the organism, this will create very serious side effects and toxicities, so you don't want that. And you also want a molecule which can be absorbed, which can be absorbed by per os, so by the mouth. It needs to be solubilized in the stomach. It needs to be absorbed in the intestine. It needs to go through the liver and not be metabolized very fast, so that it can reach the organism and the target organ. And you have many different objectives or desirable characteristics that a potential new drug must have in order to be good enough to be selected as a drug candidate, and then further studied in preclinical assays and then in clinical trials for patients in conditions where you will be able to demonstrate its efficacy and safety and impact on the disease. And this process in the pharmaceutical industry basically takes 15 years at best, and costs an average of $2.5 billion per new drug that reaches the market, so it's absolutely considerable. And the probabilities of success are abysmally low, about 1%. So this is very, very bad. This is a process which doesn't work very well at all. And what we are trying to do at Iktos, we are an artificial intelligence company. We are trying to fix the upstream research process. When you are trying to identify the best drug candidate, the one which will have the most important probabilities of making it through clinical trials to the market. And this research process takes in itself 5 to 10 years and requires the synthesis and test of thousands of molecules. And it's very difficult because it's like solving a Rubik's Cube. Everyone knows how to solve one face of the cube, but to get the 6 faces at the same time is very complicated. Because if you have one face, you want to fix the second face, you will need to break to the first face. It's the same in chemistry. If you have a molecule which is active on the target, it's not soluble, you want to modify it to make it soluble, and you will lose the activity. It's what is called a multi-parametric optimization problem. And solving this multi-parametric optimization problem is very hard for chemists, and each molecule takes weeks and a lot of money to synthesize and test. So they don't have, like infinite number of trials in order to get to the solution. They need to get to the solution as fast and as cheaply as possible.
So I mean, they need to get to that solution as fast, as cheaply as possible. What is it? I mean, what is it that you're really doing which makes that big difference? Is it the capability to compute very fast, or is it simply being able to collect a lot of data? What is it?
So basically, what we are doing is that we use the capacity of the AI technology that we have developed to imagine new chemical structures. And those new chemical structures are generated in a stochastic, a random way, in a way. But that what you can do is that you can perform some testing of those virtual structures, not of course real testing, because then you need to synthesize and test them, but in silico testing based on machine learning model, which will give you a hint on whether or not the molecule is good for each and every objective you need to optimize. And this information that you get from each molecule that is generated by the model, you can feed back to the system, and the system learns how to do molecules which will have higher scores and stop doing molecules with low scores. This is called reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning is a technology which was implemented, for example, in AlphaGo, and which was used basically to train this algorithm which beat the world champion of Go a few years ago and impressed the whole world. And we apply this to chemistry, where we basically train our algorithm to explore the world of molecules, what's called the chemical space, in order to find the best virtual structures, the ones which we have optimal scores for all the objectives and will therefore have the most chances to succeed when they are actually synthesized and tested by the chemist.
And you said earlier 10 to 15 years is, or 15 years at best, I think is the term you used for normal molecule development. How short are you going to make that? How quick can you really make that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So, of course, we are addressing, we cannot do anything for, the development part once they have selected one candidate and they need to go through preclinical trials and clinical trials. What we are ambitioning to do is to speed up and reduce the cost of the initial upstream research. And we think that we can have a huge impact on this process in terms of timelines and cost by a range of 30 to 50%.
30 to 50% reduction in both cost and timeline.
Absolutely.
That is really impressive.
And I would say also increasing the probability of success, because many of those projects fail at the research stage. And thanks to this kind of technology, we can also increase the numbers of molecules that have a chance to get to clinical development.
Kenneth, can you use his technology to apply it to the brain science that you're working on?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. I just wanted to point out first a big picture difference between the work that Yann is doing at Iktos and the work that is being done at the Qualia Research Institute. So Iktos is working on chemical solutions for diseases. When we think of, for example, depression, we have antidepressants that are fundamentally pills that you ingest through the mouth and swallow. And we're also interested in non-chemical, non-invasive technologies for improving mental well-being. The transcranial magnetic stimulation technology that I mentioned earlier is something that is completely non-invasive. It's something that you don't have to swallow. It's just a magnetic, electromagnetic coil placed over your head that sends pulses through your skull into your brain.
But to get it right, does that take a long time, working out exactly what is the pulse, where the pulse has to go? Can you apply the same sort of principles of machine learning to make sure that your, if you like, the repeated processes of trial and error are shortened?
Certainly, yeah. I think, so Iktos is interested in understanding the chemical structure of the molecules that are used in drugs. And I think we need to understand the structure of the brain to a much more precise degree than we currently do. Neuroscience right now is trapped by, I think, this paradigm that's called functional localization. What that means is you look at the areas in the brain that light up when a certain activity or task is performed. But just because we know the areas of the brain that light up when a certain activity is performed doesn't mean we know how the brain decides to light up this particular area. So we need to understand the underlying computational structure of the brain, which is something that we currently lack in our knowledge of neuroscience.
Yeah, and you wanted to come back in here.
I think it's important, just to follow up on what you just said, that to understand that to get new good drugs on the market or new good solutions to diseases which can be something else than drugs, like medtech technologies, you need to understand the biology, and this is really what Kenneth is doing. And once you have a good understanding of the biology, then you can identify what are the best ways to address the biological mechanism you have been able to refine and define precisely. And this can either be through drugs or through different kind of interventions, like surgery or transmagnetic stimulation or other stuff. And I think that's you must really see those two approaches as complementary And in order to have an impact on public health, as far as disease is concerned, you need both investment in biology and drug design, drug discovery.
Julien, let me come back to you. You're down to earth or down to water, very much on the ground, as opposed to this longer term stuff that's going on here. Can you tell me a little bit about the commercial model that you're using there? Because I think that's interesting to me. I mean, we're talking here about drug development and very expensive long-term processes and so on. Can you tell me about the commercial model that really works on the ground for people looking to provide a simple, basic commodity water?
I believe that for bottom of pyramid population, you have to think about hybrid models. So you have to be a bit creative on that. So in this case, but there are other examples in access to energy, for example, the initial investment, so to build the plant, to train the local entrepreneurs and to create sort of a awareness on your product is financed by philanthropy. Okay, so the generosity of our donors, we invest it in the project because there's no way you can reimburse any capex, considering the level of price you're selling. But what's interesting and sustainable is that the operating expenses are being self-covered by the sale of water. So the entrepreneur on the ground sells a bottle of 20 liters for 20 cents. So it's 1 cent per liter. So you're making the product affordable, and you're obviously creating social impact. And when you think about marketing, commercial activity, people will tell you, yes, but you're selling the water. Yes, but actually what happened before is that they were not buying water, but they were boiling water, and actually it has a cost to buy the charcoal and all, and we are not even talking about the cost to go to the doctor and all. So when you, Esther Duflo, who has just been named a Nobel Prize for Economics yesterday and worked a lot on the area of development, said I think an interesting thing on that is that poor people, you shouldn't consider them as poor people, with an angle that's a bit old-fashioned. You have to consider them as consumers with the needs. It's not because they are poor that they don't have needs, that they don't have desire. The fact of being delivered at home is actually more important for them than the fact of drinking safe water.
So here we've got a very simple commercial equation. Kenneth, the Qualis Institute, I mean, is that philanthropy, or how do you monetize? When are you going to monetize what you're doing, and how is that going to work?
Great question. So the Qualia Research Institute is a research nonprofit at the moment. We don't have any commercial products, although we are starting to develop a simple technology that we might be able to roll out in a couple of years. Really, as I was saying earlier, we need to have a much more precise understanding of the brain and of neuroscience before we're able to develop really finely targeted interventions.
Okay. And Yann, you're not producing the drugs, but you are already commercial.
Yeah, we are, what we are is a small startup company, and we are focused on technology, artificial intelligence, big data, in silico design. And we don't want to get in the business of, developing drugs ourselves, which is, another world which requires a lot of money, a lot of experience, expertise, capabilities, which we don't have. So we partner with pharmaceutical companies who do this research every day in their research labs. We also partner with some philanthropic organizations. We have a partnership with the Drug for Neglected Disease Initiative, for example, which is funded, among others, by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for developing new drugs for neglected diseases like malaria and other parasitic disease in the third world countries.
Let me come back to the three of you now. I'm throwing you a little tough question. What is top of your wish list? What is the thing you really want to see happen in a year, in the next year, in what you're doing?
I would say full economic sustainability in Cambodia, and we're in line for that.
Brilliant. Very well done. Kenneth.
So the core theory of the Qualia Research Institute is something called the Symmetry theory of valence. And I'll give a very high-level description since we don't have too much time left. It's basically the idea that greater harmony in your brainwaves corresponds to more pleasant experiences. And we're just beginning to get some of the first data to substantiate this theory. So within the next year, hopefully we'll have a lot more data.
So far, the technology we have developed, we have applied through drug discovery programs which are pretty well advanced, where our partners have already invested a lot, generated significant amount of data, and we help them accelerating their programs. And this works quite well. And we have already demonstrated that this works well in a real case study. Now what we are investing in and doing is to apply the technology to start at a much earlier stage of research. And here we believe that there can be a paradigm shift if you are able to start from limited amount of information and design very original active molecules with drug-like characteristics which can be considered as valid molecules of interest for future partnering out. And if you are able to generate that in the year to come, we'll be very happy.
Thank you very much, all three of you. Let me wish you every success in achieving those targets that you're looking for. A big round of applause, please, for Julien, Kenneth, and Yann.